Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Alex, and I will be the technical manager for this session, Crowdsourcing Food Prices with Poket, chaired by Andrea Balungu and joined by several members of the Poket team today. I'd like to thank you all for taking part in ANH 2024. This is actually our last learning lab of this conference week. We've had so many great sessions, and I'm excited to have a great one to close this out as well. We're really excited for this informative and interactive session with the Poket team today. And I'd like to offer a quick reminder that everything you might need to access, whether it's conference materials, program, or recordings of our other learning labs, can be found on our ANH Academy website. So before Andrea takes things forward, I just have a few technical reminders for you to ensure that our experience today is very smooth and as interactive as possible. First, this session will be recorded and posted to our website following the conference. So you're free to watch that to relive the experience if you like. And second, you've all been muted for now, but please introduce yourselves using the chat function. We'd like to know your name, where you're joining us from, and what organization you're with as well. We encourage you to share your webcam video feed if your internet connection allows. And if you have any questions, we invite you to share them in the chat box throughout the session. And lastly, if at any point you experience any technical issues, please check your audio settings, internet connection. You can always try to reconnect to the session using the same Zoom link you used before. If you have any technical questions at all, please send me a private message using the chat box, and I'll be sure to help you with what you need. So with all that said, thanks again so much for being here today, and I'll hand it over to Andrea to get this session going.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay? Hopefully, I see maybe some nodding heads. All right, and you can hopefully see my screens as well. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all that stuff. My name is Andrea Balungu, as Alex said, and thank you, Alex, for the very kind introduction. And thanks to everyone for being here and joining us today. I hope that that this turns out to be a good final learning lab for you all. So in a few minutes, we are going to be asking you all to tell us a little bit about yourselves and your interests and what you're hoping to get out of the learning lab. But first, I want to start with some introductions of your presenters, of us. So as I said, I'm Andrea Balungu. I am, among other things, an Amana Fellow, so a current Amana Fellow. I also wear a few other hats. I'm a nutrition research consultant and also a research assistant professor at Washington University in St. Louis. I am based in Kampala, Uganda. So for my Imana Fellows study, my study focused on food prices in Kampala, Uganda, which again is where I'm based. I use several methods for collecting food price data. Among one of them was crowdsourcing. And I was so thrilled and so grateful in retrospect to have found Poket, which is an amazing crowdsourcing app. And so I have the Poket team here with me today who is going to be co-presenting, helping me tell you about the makeup version of the Poket app, but also many more features that are available beyond what we were able to use in our app. So with that, Camille, I wanted to hand it to you. And if you can introduce yourself and your team, that would be great. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Andrea, and appreciate everyone attending today. We're excited to share a little bit more about our work. My name's Kamil, so I'm the co-founder of Poket, and we are based out of Toronto, Canada, as you can see on the slide. We're a social enterprise that works with academic researchers, international NGOs, development practitioners, agri-food businesses, and more to really customize a suite of tools for data collection, and we're excited to tell you a little bit more about that. My background is in enterprise analytics and international development. Homera, who's on our team, will also be doing a quick walkthrough of the application as well. She's a digital analyst on our team. Poket is supported by Solve, which is an initiative of MIT, the Creative Destruction Lab out of the University of Toronto, the SPG Agri-Food Accelerator, and a few others that we're excited to tell you about a little in a little bit too. So I'm going to pass it back to Andrea, and thanks everyone for giving us this platform to present and share our work. We couldn't be more excited.
Thanks. This might happen quite a bit. Okay, so thanks, Kamal. So as I mentioned, I'm a current Amana Fellow, and this learning lab draws on my Amana-funded study, and that study was called MECA, Methods of Collecting Food Prices in Kampala, Uganda. So to kick off, I know we're just getting warmed up, but I'm wondering if anyone on the call knows what MECA means and can feel free to jump into the chat box. Or I don't know, Alex, if they're allowed to turn on their audio or not, but maybe just put it in the chat box if you know the meaning of the word MECA.
Yeah, and you're welcome to come off mute as well.
Give you a few moments for this. So this would be people who are my friends and colleagues from Uganda who are on here. Okay, so I'm not seeing any submissions, so I'm just going to go ahead and give you the punchline. So the word MECA, it's on the screen already. Someone says it's on the screen. You guys are just seeing my slides, right? Yeah,
Yep.
okay. So the meaning of MECA, so it's a Luganda word, and it's basically the word that is used to find out basically how much is it. So whenever you go into the market, if you are purchasing food, you might point at something and say MECA, and MECA means how much is it, basically. So that's the meaning of the name behind the study. So as I mentioned, MECA, it's an Amana-funded study. The aim was to pilot and compare innovative methods of food price data collection to traditional methods, and then also to describe the variability of prices of foods that comprise both a healthy and an unhealthy diet within the 5 districts of Kampala. So as I've kind of tried to illustrate here, I use 3 different methods for food price data collection. First, probably the most common one, the one that you might be most familiar with, are the markets, traditional, basically market surveys, where you have research assistants going into the markets and collecting prices for foods. The data that we got from that, I'll be comparing to data that is collected by the Uganda Bureau of Statistics for their CPI, their Consumer Price Index reports. But then the third method, and this is where Poket comes in, is crowdsourcing. So in addition to these other methods, we also use crowdsourcing to collect food prices within the city of Kampala. And this is another word for crowdsourcing, or another term that's commonly used are citizen scientists. And so this is where Poket came in. Again, they're the platform that supported this work. That really was the app that enabled this to happen. So all to say that crowdsourcing is just one component of this overall study, but it's a really important one, and it's one of the truly innovative components of the MECA study. But I just wanted to give you all kind of a bird's eye view of the big picture before we dive in deep into the crowdsourcing bit. Okay, so also before we begin, I want to just remind everyone of our goals for the Learning Lab. So why are we here? So my chief aim is that you walk away from this learning lab with a better understanding of how crowdsourcing can be leveraged as a research method, and specifically for food price data collection. And then if things go as planned, most of our time today will actually be spent getting hands-on experience with some of the key tasks of food price data collection. So you will have the chance to download the Poket app, install it, submit food price data, and then also ultimately see what that data looks like when you are looking at it from the dashboard from an administrator's perspective. So a friendly reminder here, we are going to be using your smartphone, so you might want to make sure that your smartphone is handy if it isn't already. Another aim of mine, at least, is to make you suffer, but just a little bit. So I'm hoping that we're going to get the chance to walk through some examples of reporting food prices. And so part of walking through these are examples that actually come from my study. And so part of this is forcing you basically to deal with some of the issues, the key issues that come up when you are reporting food price data. And so kind of gird yourself for that. And then finally, I just hope that we're going to have some really great discussion. So I'm presenting this learning lab because I've been in this food price world for over a year with this study, but I'm not pretending to be the world's greatest expert in food prices. And moreover, food price data collection looks really different depending on what your context is. So I just want to encourage you that if you do have experiences to share, if you have opinions, if you have thoughts, if you have questions, we would really love to hear those. And so please don't be shy. So feel free to use the chat box, and we will be kind of monitoring that as we go. So our plan for the next 2 hours minus 10 minutes. So introductions, we're gonna jump over to you guys really shortly. Then I'm gonna give a little bit of overview of what is crowdsourcing, what do we mean by that? Kamal is then going to introduce you to Poket and the Poket platform. After that, I'm going to introduce you to the mega instance of the Poket platform. So I'll walk you through exactly what we did for the mega study using Poket. And then we're going to open it up to you all, and we'll start getting our hands dirty. So again, I'm hoping that most of our time in this learning lab will be spent there, and then we'll have a little bit of time for discussion. Okay, so first I wanted to start because I think, and I think our rating showed we don't have so much familiarity even with what crowdsourcing is. So I wanted to start there with some definitions first. So I think at its simplest, I like this definition that I have found of crowdsourcing, which is basically just getting a crowd of people to help you with a task that's typically performed by a single individual or group. So it seems pretty simple, right? But as in so many things in life, when you dig into it, it gets a little bit more complicated. So crowdsourcing actually, I think is maybe best understood as an umbrella term that covers a lot of different types of activities. The ones that you see here, and probably even more because this is a pretty fast moving space. So on the far left is crowdfunding. This is not the space that we're working in here with this study, but I'm sure you all have probably, received a request from like GoFundMe or something like that for donating money to some particular cause. Crowdsourcing can also be used for contests. So I see this in the graphic design space a lot where, they will run a logoed contest and everyone creates their logo and they submit it and the winner gets an award. The space, though, that is most pertinent to this conversation is on this far right of the side. And the term citizen science might probably be like a good encapsulator of this. So it's basically when the public volunteers to help move some type of science along. And often this is what are called either micro tasks, where the researcher has set out particular, but it doesn't have to be research, but has explicitly set out discrete tasks that individuals can do, or macro tasks where they just set the overall objective and then individuals decide what they can contribute to that. So it's a pretty big space. I just wanted to give you a sense for kind of what the scope of crowdsourcing is when we talk about crowdsourcing. And crowdsourcing is not just a phenomenon of pop culture. So the research community has been interested in crowdsourcing for well over a decade. As evidence, I have pulled some definitions from the peer-reviewed literature dating back to 2012. These tend to I think as academia often does, they tend to reflect the particular period of time in which they were written. They tend to reflect particular platforms, specific platforms. I would say with the exception maybe of the WHO definition, which is more, I think, platform agnostic and probably all the better for that. But again, just to give you a sense that this isn't anything new, but it's kind of a fast moving space. Also, to kind of continue to get us in the mood, I wanted to show some examples of crowdsourcing over time. So this is actually, I don't know if you are old like me, you might remember SETI at Home. I do. This is back from 1999. It was, I think, as in my memory, one of the first crowdsourced, at least online applications where basically you could donate your machine, the time that you weren't using your machine to be looking for ETs. This is actually something that I think is run by NASA or was run by NASA. You had people all over the world who were donating their machine time to be able to look for aliens. So this was back in 1999. From a closer to a health kind of realm. So in 2010, you have one of the first instances of crowdsourcing being used to help disaster response. So this is OpenStreetMaps from in the aftermath that was created in the aftermath of the 2010 Haiti earthquake. And so you had, I think what I've read is over 600 individuals around the world that were marking up this map, not only to show like where the passable roads were, but also where the damage from the earthquake was. And so it was something that was done, again, it was a crowdsourced application, but this became a really essential tool to the disaster response that happened in that aftermath, because there had not been such a detailed map of Port-au-Prince before this. So that was 2010. And if you think 1999 was a long time ago, oh my God. So there's this thing that's called the Audubon Christmas bird count. So this is an example of one that is not online. This definitely predates the internet. So the Audubon Christmas bird count has been happening since 1900. And basically on one day every year, people go out and record the birds that they see in their own little neighborhood. And so this is an example of what you might call ecological monitoring or biological sensors. Basically, it involves the crowd, the general public, in monitoring biodiversity and things like that. Nowadays, there are online versions. I think the Cornell Institute, Ornithological Institute, has an online version of something of the same, where it's not just on Christmas Day, it's all year round, but it's just volunteers that provide a really important service when it comes to monitoring. And then I think last but not, no, this is almost last. So the most recent example, so this is from the COVID pandemic, of course. So in California, an app was created to try to monitor vaccine availability in California. And so you had about 60 volunteers who every day would call up something like 500 facilities and ask them about their vaccine availability, and then provide that information back. So another crowdsourced health-related intervention. And then this is the last but not least. So any of my friends and colleagues from Uganda, these pictures will look familiar. Kampala suffers from a lot of potholes. And so in 2023, there was an initiative to basically report the potholes. And so this is, I think, a good example of social accountability. This really did get the attention of government, the city government, et cetera. It's made a lot of discussion. It was in the news a lot. And so this is another, I think, good example of that. I'm not so sure if there was a reporting app for this, but there is a study that was created where they have demonstrated the potential for creating a pothole reporting platform. So I thought that was a good and pertinent example to show. Okay, so that's the end of the big picture examples. I now want to hand it over to Kamal, and he will tell you a little bit more about Pocket in particular. Over to you, Kamal.
Thanks so much, Andrea. We're gonna keep the screen on here, so I'll just ask you to maybe go to the next slide whenever I finish each one. So we'll just start off by overall getting a sense that it's really difficult for any type of international development practitioner, research agency, researcher to do field data collection. And it's challenging for a lot of different reasons. And if you just want to switch to the next slide for me, Andrea. There's a few different reasons, as everybody kind of who's done research on this call has probably understood by now, is that, it's not easy to find researchers or enumerators to go out into the field, to pay for their training and dedicate the resources that's needed to train, and then also have them be transported to these communities, which sometimes are a little bit more remote. And so that makes the entire experience very costly and resource intensive. And what it also means is that we cannot collect data really, really frequently, right? If we have to have people that are, knocking on doors or going to specific communities to collect data, it means that there's, only so many times that the data can be collected. And what it also means is if you're doing some type of data collection for, let's say, human subject research, and you're asking them about any type of historical data, then that data is also subject to recall bias. Because if you ask someone, what the price of onions was, let's say 6 months ago, they probably won't have a really great insight or response for you compared to if you're able to get that data in real time. So all of these challenges make traditional forms of data collection a little bit of a challenge, despite the fact that this is the way that most data collection is done today. And if you just want to go to the next slide for me, Andrea. What we believe is that we can actually incentivize regular citizens, field users, participants to crowdsource or self-report this data in real time. And that's basically the software that Pocket's built. It's a smartphone application where researchers, NGOs, international development practitioners can incentivize last mile users or students or citizens or community members or store owners or farmers or traders or whoever it is across the agri-food supply chain to be able to not only complete surveys and answer questions and do this type of crowdsourcing or self-reported data, but also access new insights. We're going to, speak a little bit about how traditional forms of data collection can sometimes be a little extractive, and there's an interesting opportunity here to create feedback loops and share some data that's generated by individual community members back with the entire crowd or the aggregate. And so that's also a large focus of our work, which we're going to speak about it in a little bit as well. So just to the next slide, a little bit more about Pocket. As I've kind of described here, we really focus on international development use cases across a few different sectors that we'll talk about. And a large focus is this idea of being able to incentivize or reward data collection, which Andrea has a lot of insight on from her project. And we just really want to convey that although Pocket can be used for traditional forms of field data collection, so it is used quite a bit by field researchers and enumerators and research participants and students, our niche and our focus is this idea of community-led monitoring or participatory forms of research. Today, Andrea is talking a lot about crowdsourcing, which is a big one. But this whole idea of allowing citizens or community members to be the stewards of data collection is something that we're a proponent of, and we like giving a lot of talks on. So just moving forward to the next slide, when we think about data collection in this way by using citizen science or a crowdsourcing-led approach, it actually has a lot of benefits in the sense that it's a lot more accessible to collect data this way in terms of how expensive it can be to pay for transport, for example. And because of that, the data can be collected really granularly as opposed to, let's say, every 3 months or every 6 months or whenever an organization or researcher can afford to go out into the field. By having folks that are already in these communities and empowered with technology, we can actually create a much more kind of frequent real-time feed of data. And what it also means is that this idea of recall bias is kind of eliminated in the sense that now the data is coming in real time and you're not asking folks to report on historical data. Ideally, it's kind of a real-time pulse. What it also means is new incentives for community members and participants. As you might see in some of the slides, a large focus of our work is on kind of taking the savings from traditional forms of data collection and passing them down to community members or citizens or program beneficiaries for an NGO. And the last part is this idea of community feedback loops, where not only is Pocket being used to collect data, but also share data back with users who have our application. So if we just go to the next slide here, very quickly, the way that we work with different organizations and researchers is we first try to understand, what they want the tools to look like. And so with Andrea, there was an exercise around understanding, okay, where is this tool being used? How many people are going to be using it? What are the questions that you want to ask? Is it human subject research? Do we need consent mechanisms built in? Are there data privacy and security requirements? Are there language translations that are needed? So these are all the things that our team tries to understand at the beginning of a project, and then we configure and customize the tools accordingly. From there, we work with the researcher to make sure that the tools are tried and tested and they're happy with it. And then from there, the researcher puts the tools in the hands of their participants. In this case, it's community members or citizens who are participating in this project. And the last part of it, which Andrea will also show later today, is just being able to access and see all the data that comes in through the field. So on the next slide, and maybe one more, we'll go through just very quickly the way our solution works, and you'll get a real demo of this in just a few minutes. So the first and most important tool is a smartphone application. And this really allows the users in the field to do three main things. The first is to complete data entry tasks and submit surveys. The second is to receive rewards and points and incentives for these surveys. And then the third thing is to be able to access insights, resources, information, dashboards, and other types of information that could be useful to the participants or the crowdsourcers. A few other features very quickly is it does work on low-cost Android devices. The tool also works offline. So if you're working in a remote area or in a rural community where internet access is a challenge, we allow the user to collect data on the device without an internet connection and upload it later when they do have time. There's another kind of feature that's focused on incentivizing and gamifying this whole experience. If you want to have a leaderboard where users can see each other's standing in terms of how much data that they've collected, that's another factor or another feature, sorry. And then there's this idea of different user groups and treatment arms. So if you're doing a randomized control trial, then you can have different groups or segments that have different types of questions or different incentives in different countries, and we can create these different cohorts that way. And the last part, which we'll speak to in a little bit more detail later too, is this idea of users being able to see each other's submissions. Andrea, I'm not sure for your project this was a large focus, but overall, if, for example, you have crowdsourcing and you want users to be able to see the aggregate prices of all of the crowdsourced inputs, we can share that data back in the smartphone application as well. So it's this really kind of customizable tool where users can see each other's submissions if it makes sense for a project or program, or it's just really focused on one-to-one data collection. And the second part of it to the next slide is the dashboard, which you'll also get a look at today. And this allows the organization or the researcher to build out forms, to view all of the information and submissions that are coming in from the field, verify that information and being able to accept or reject it, or maybe also give users in the field feedback as to why, for example, the submission has not been accepted. And then the users in the field have an opportunity to resubmit that data. And also it allows you to export all the raw data. Sometimes we build out data visualization and analytics for specific projects. And we also allow organizations to upload seed data. And what that means is, let's say you have a map of vendors that you want citizens to go to, and you know where these vendors are, and you know their names, and you have a map of them. You can actually upload that information here, and it'll actually appear in the smartphone application. And so all the users have to do is kind of click on a pin in their map, navigate to that pin, and then complete an observation about that vendor, which, for example, could be the price of a specific commodity or food. So that's really it in terms of the way that the tools work. If we just want to go to the next slide. And one thing that I kind of wanted to mention is in traditional forms of data collection, there's this kind of one-way stream of information where you have data collectors or researchers, research participants that are completing data entry tasks or submitting ideas and experiences or potentially doing some type of a location-based module like boundary mapping or sharing any type of GIS insights. But if we go to the next slide here, what Poket is really focused on is this idea of sharing data and incentives back with the users. So this could be real-time verification of the user's data. It could be a community-based map or dashboard of the different types of analytics or insights or submissions that are being made for the project. It could be an incentive, which in many cases is mobile money, or a gift card or a certificate of good citizenship or extra credit for students. You know, we've seen a lot of researchers and NGOs do really interesting types of rewards. that we can customize. It could be links to videos, it could be links to resources, it could be links to WhatsApp groups, it could be real-time push notifications or reminders to complete surveys. So really there's all these different things that Pocket can do, not only to allow an organization or a researcher to collect data, but also share that data back in an aggregated or anonymized way if it makes sense for the project, in addition to incentivizing this data collection. So to the next slide here, well, yeah, I already kind of spoke to this one. And then really quickly, kind of the areas that we work in. The first is in agri-food and sustainability. So that's really the focus of this talk today. I'm not going to go through all these use cases that you see on the screen, but overall, we work in these three different sectors: agri-food sustainability, urban and financial inclusion, and global health and nutrition. So if you are a researcher or you're an organization on the call who works in any of these sectors and is interested in any type of data collection tool or survey software, we're excited to kind of learn more about your work. And very, very quickly, I'm going to fly through each one of these use cases in, 15, 20 seconds each. But just to give you some examples, we've done work across many sectors. This one is focused on crowdsourcing and understanding, if there's discriminatory pricing practices across the agri-food supply chain in East Africa. So all of these are use cases that we've enabled. The next one is focused on an international NGO that empowered women participants of savings groups to not only self-report on economic indicators and their experience with these VSLA groups, but also receive rewards and digital training to be able to become data collectors in their communities. And now this program is being scaled up. The next slide focuses on the use of Pocket for understanding insights around UNHCR hand washing stations in a refugee camp across Bangladesh. The next one focuses on boundary mapping and agriculture, specifically in Nigeria, where smallholder farms were very poorly mapped. So just very quickly, I wanted to give a little bit of a sense of the breadth of the different types of use cases that we have. As we mentioned, my name's Kamil. I kind of lead the partnerships and business development side of Pocket. We're supported by MIT through their Solve program and a few others. Naba is my co-founder, who's also on the call. She leads technology. And overall, we have a lot of great partnerships and supporters, and have worked with NGOs, researchers across the world on making community-led monitoring and self-reported data and crowdsourcing a more focal part of data collection, monitoring, and evaluation. And with that said, I think this is the last one before I pass it back, Andrea, to you. And excited to kind of have a few folks start actually using these tools. And hopefully this presentation is helpful for understanding how Andrea also used the tools for her project here.
Thank you so much, Kamal. That was fantastic. And just for all of you to know, if that piqued your interest, we will. So first of all, you can just Google for Pocket, but also we'll have Kamal's information at the end of this slide deck, or you can always send us an email or what have you, and we will get you in touch. So as Kamal said, we now want to shift gears. Kind of moving out of the crowdsourcing writ large space and diving more specifically into food prices. So food prices, as I'm sure you all know, are collected by a lot of different organizations and researchers and for a variety of purposes. And that kind of scope of where and why food prices are collected is beyond the scope of this learning lab. So for the purposes of our discussion, I'm just going to describe what I wanted from the MEGA study. So what I have on this screen, these are the kind of the initial specs that I gave to Pocket. They are based on how I believe that people make food purchases in Uganda, and they also reflect some of the specific research interests that I had, such as I wanted to collect information not just about the food items that were purchased, but also about the vendors. So what type of vendors were people going to? And I also wanted to try to get information about other costs that are incurred when you are purchasing food, and specifically transportation costs. So in addition to answering questions about the vendor, I also asked questions like, how long did it take you to travel? What was the distance that was traveled? What was your mode of transportation? And what was the cost of that transportation? But the basic mental model that I had is that an individual would go to a market, and once they're at the market, they will then purchase one or more foods at that market. So on day one, and you'll see this in the flow. So I'm just kind of previewing what you will see later. So you will, go to a vendor on day one. You will report food price maybe for pumpkin, and food price for Sukuma wiki, and food price for rice. You might go to a different vendor and you might report the price for fish or the price for meat. And then the next day, you're probably going to go back maybe to the same vendor. I mean, everyone here, like anyone there, you have particular markets or vendors that you like, and you tend to go back over and over again. So this is the idea that you're going to a particular vendor and you're buying or you're reporting food from more than one food items from the same vendor. And so this is the type of task flow that I tried to recreate basically within the Poket app. I see a question that came in from Victoria. So she's asking, did they have to purchase the foods, or can they just report? So that they could do whatever. So this is a crowd. And so if they wanted to just report the price without purchasing, that was up to them. So in Uganda, there is a wide range of market types, vendor types, from very formal, like supermarkets that would look like anything that you might see in the West, to very informal, like street vendors, people who are just literally like sitting on the street with their goods. And so someone like a street vendor, you may not be able to know the price unless you ask them, and then you can't ask them and then not buy it. So in that case, someone might have to buy it. But usually what my expectations were and my hopes were that people would just, as they are going about their normal day-to-day business, everyone is growing, as you're purchasing foods, that you would be reporting as you go. So I'm not asking you to make any special trips or do anything special other than the reporting. You're just reporting on where you typically go and the foods that you typically purchase. So again, to give you a bit of a preview of what this looks like, and again, you're going to have your hands on this very soon, I promise. On the far left, we have this is the landing screen this is the Poket app. It's the mega version of the Poket app. So, and just to clarify what I mean by that, so if it, for other applications, I'm sure their landing screen and their tools look quite different, but this is the mega version of it. So there's a landing screen. The first thing you will do, and I'm pointing towards the second screen here, is create a vendor. So you're going to give that vendor a name. You're going to indicate what type of vendor it is. And then that's all you have to do there, other than take a geostamp. So what's another cool feature of Poket is that you can just create that geostamp right away as you go, and then you can map all this data. So the far right screen, so after you enter the information about the vendor, you're then prompted to enter this information about your travel. And again, this is I have specific analyses that I want to do down the road. And so I've asked these questions. And so so I'm asking how many minutes basically did it take you to get to this vendor? What distance did you travel? How did you get there? So the mode of transport. So you fill out that information, and then you're basically done with the vendor. You can then reselect that vendor and enter in information about your particular food items. So this is on the right-hand side. So here I'm reporting a price for cooking oil. That is 3 liters. So again, this is just kind of a quick snapshot of what it looks like. You're going to get your hands on it in just a minute. There's one last kind of big thing that I wanted to mention about the MAKA study, which is, as Kamal mentioned, one of the ways of doing crowdsourcing, or one of the kind of features to try to encourage participation, is to offer incentives. And so I did do that in this study, and I used incentives to try to, incentivize the activities that I was most interested in. So, this study ran for Actually, the crowdsourcing portion of it ran for about 3 months. The broader portion went for about 6 months, but I wanted participants to report food prices not just once, but basically frequently over that 3-month period of time. So basically, I was hoping that anytime they go shopping, that they are also pulling out the Pocket app and reporting the food prices. So I incentivized the number of weeks that they participated. So the more often they reported food prices, well, let's say the more consistently over 3 months they reported, the more they benefited. They got these small kind of micro payments. I also wanted them to report a variety of foods. So not just the staple foods, for instance, but a wide variety of foods. And so I incentivized not only the number of food items that they reported, but also I incentivized the number of food groups that they reported. So maybe it was 10 food items, but they were all starches, a food group 1, so to speak, or maybe it was 10 items and they represented a wide diversity of food groups. And so my preference was that they report a wide variety. And so I was incentivizing that as well. So these were, again, small payments that were sent at the end of every 2-week reporting period. This table just shows kind of my planning for that to make sure that I was not getting myself underwater. So what would be the worst case scenario, kind of the worst case, but also the best case scenario. So if I had 150 people who were, submitting, reporting food prices for 24 weeks, what would be the cost of the project? And so that's just where those calculations were. Okay, so that was a lot of information. And now we are going to start playing with Pocket. So, Amira, I'm wondering, so should we go ahead and try with you presenting on the okay, great. I'm going to stop sharing and then you can start sharing. Okay. So there's a Android version and an iOS version. So please everyone get your smartphone ready, and then if you're on Android, go ahead and scan the Android QR code, and if you're iOS, scan that one. But Amira, I'm going to let you walk us through from here. And just let me know when you want me to stop sharing again.
Of course. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll just give you guys a few minutes, and I'll walk you through the account sign up process, just like through audio, so that you guys can do it as I'm speaking, and you'll still have access to the QR codes for those that still need it. So yeah, if you're Android, scan the Android. If you're iOS, scan the iOS version. You should be directed directly to the app, and then you just want to install. Once enough people have installed, please just drop like a reaction or a little note in the chat, and then we can move forward. There we go. So I'm just gonna take you guys from step 1, Pocket app. If you were to search it in the App Store, you'd just be searching Pocket app, and this is what it should look like. For those of you that aren't able to use the link, you can just do it through this. And once it's downloaded, you're just going to open it in here. Second. There we go. Okay, so your initial view of the app is going to ask you about your language and region. For the purposes of the demo, we'll just go with the default settings, but you can change that if you have it configured to a certain language, if you've had that translation set up, and then you can configure that. And then you're going to create your account. So we do have this accept and continue, so this terms and condition, but I'll let Andrea jump in just for a second, because she does want to make a note that there are different terms and conditions that you will be accepting when you're actually filling out the data portion.
Yeah, thanks, Amira. So just to be clear, what you're going to see in just a minute, the IRB informed consent, that is not this. So this, there's kind of 2 steps. First is creating the Pocket account and accepting the Pocket terms and conditions. These would be similar to any terms and conditions that you would be accepting to use any, social media or anything like that. It has nothing to do with the study per se. But then you will also see later on that you will be, because MECA is a study and Crowdsourcing is considered human subjects research and has to go through IRB review. So you will also be in just a minute prompted to review and either consent or not consent to the informed consent. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So I've just gone ahead and filled out this account creation information. A couple things to note. You want to make sure that your country code for your phone number is correct and that your phone number is correct, because you'll need it for verification purposes in just a minute. And then the engagement code at the end. So food prices crowd dropped in the chat. You can just copy and paste that in, or you can type it out. And then that basically completes the account creation form. You'll get an SMS to your phone or your mobile device via the number that you entered. And once you do that, you'll enter the verification code in here. I've actually entered the correct phone number, which is a good example of what not to do, the incorrect phone number. So I'm just going to redo that really quickly. So everyone can see my password. There you go. Okay, that should be good. All right, so I've just received that verification code to my phone, and I'm going to type it in. And that's basically it. You're in, and you just want to make sure that you accept any notification settings, allow your notifications, allow your location, and that way Pocket can perform properly. And this is the dashboard view, the home page, so to speak, that Andrea was referring to. As you can see, it's divided into available and unavailable tasks. So you have your available task, which is profile. Before you move on to the vendors and the reporting of the prices, you want to make sure that you submit this survey. So we want to click start, and then you just enter your information, your profile information, and you set it up. I'm going to quickly go through this and just use some filler information. And then right here, we're going to do the consent. So this is the consent that Andrea was speaking about. Quick overview of that. So you always want to make sure you read through that carefully. And then once you're done, click, I have read the data collection agreement.
And so just
yeah.
for future researchers, so that consent form that went through IRB review, we had a back and forth with UNCST as the IRB, the ethical approval entity here in Uganda. So there's a lot of attention that was paid to this and making sure that you can't actually access the app unless you do consent. If you don't consent, then you don't have access to the app, of course, because otherwise then we'd be getting your data. So just to clarify, thanks. Over.
Okay, perfect. So yep, and that profile form is very short. Once you're done, you can move on to the next form. So once you finish one form, you'll be able to see it in the submissions page. So I've just clicked that little clipboard icon that says submission, and you'll be able to see whatever you submit in this page. So going back to the dashboard, now you can submit the vendor form that Andrea showed the screenshots of. So I'm just going to, forgive the inaccuracy if there is something that I write that is funny. But yeah, so you're going to record your location. Moving on to the next one, how much time travel to the vendor, let's say 25 minutes, miles, let's say 10, mode of transportation, and the cost. There you go. So that's all it takes, very quick, very easy. You can do this for as many vendors that's my understanding, that you can do it for as many vendors as you need. And you go back home, and once you're done that, you can actually do the shopping trip survey. And you want to do that through the submission page. So you're just going to go to that submission page and
Hey,
click.
Humaira. Humaira, can we pause for a minute, because folks are getting quite lost. And I'm wondering, can we just take it to the slides so we can walk folks through a bit slower? That's
Sure.
okay?
Yeah, not a problem. Alternatively, if you wanted me to just do the same process again a little bit slower, I can do that too.
Let's just do it on the slides, I think.
Sure, no
But
worries.
so it sounds like everyone has been able to install the app. Can folks, let us know if you are having any difficulty. If you're trying to download it and you haven't been able to download it. I've been looking at the chat. It looks like there's some countries where Pocket is not available, not able to complete completely. What are, go ahead and let us know what difficulties you're having, if you're having any. Okay, folks are still creating the account. So again, so there's this first step where you will, after you install it, you're going to create account. It's just going to ask for a username and a password and your phone number, and then this engagement code, which I've highlighted in this screen here. And after you create that, the Pocket is going to prompt you with the terms and conditions. Not able to get the code. Okay, so you're not, so you have put in your phone number. So one of the things to make sure is that you have changed the country code to your country code. It defaults to Canada, which is CA+1. For instance, if you're in Uganda, you want to make sure that you change that to the 256, as you see in this screenshot. If you're in Nigeria, what, 234, is that right? So just make sure that you change that, and then I'm not getting a verification code.
So one thing as
Uh,
well, just for Andrea, if you don't mind me just jumping in as well. So in some of the countries, I know there's folks from many different countries from Andrea's Mentimeter poll here. So there's some countries in which Pocket is available, but we may not have done a project there before, so it hasn't been configured in detail for that specific country. So in the event that you're not getting a code right now, it's possible that that server has not been set up for the country that you're in to deploy an automated verification code. So please bear with us. We may not be able to manually send everyone a code, but if you do have any issues accessing, please do write the country that you're based out of, and that will also help our team understand um, why that challenge might be happening. But in any event, we may just need to move forward because it's probably not something we can diagnose for every single country, for every single user on this call. But hopefully there's been some people who have been able to join.
Ori, can you, when you said that you're unable to get the verification code, can you tell me a little bit more? Is that because Nigeria isn't covered, or is there some other reason why you're not getting it? Or can you explain what's happening?
I'm actually in the UK. I'm not sure why. I think it's probably because when I entered my phone number in, I put the 0 after the UK,
Yes.
before the number, but I've tried to then correct that and it's not accepting it. So I'll try another username maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't put your leading 0 in.
Yeah.
The other thing I would mention is that if your phone has dual SIMs, that might cause some problems with getting a verification code. So please make sure like your phone only supports one SIM card.
Then I think let's give this a few more minutes, guys, because if we can't get registered, then we're not going to be able to go through the app. So let's give it a few more minutes. Or can you let us know if you have any success?
Sometimes it can also be helpful if you go off Wi-Fi and you're in LTE, we found. But it really does depend country by country.
Okay, we have at least one success. My phone supports dual SIM. I was able to navigate seamlessly. Perfect. Okay. So I think it sounds like we do have some people on. So maybe we'll keep going. So but we can continue to help folks who, if you're still having specific difficulties, maybe through the chat. Okay, so after you have, yay, glad to hear that. All right, okay. So once you have gotten that confirmation code and you enter it, you're going to be then prompted at the welcome back screen. So this is the main screen. So if you see this, and then the only available task that will be available to you at this time, it leads to turn on, yes, so it's gonna ask you to turn on the GPS, and you will need to turn on your GPS. This is actually a really handy feature of Pocket, is that GPS geostamp for multiple reasons. One, for just kind of verifying the date, like where the data was taken, but for a second reason, if you have, so I actually had my research assistants using Pocket. And so as a mechanism of quality control, just being able to make sure that they are where they say they are is super useful. So yeah, please turn on your GPS. Great. So folks on the welcome page. So now the only step that you'll be able to take is to press on that start button, and it's going to prompt you to create a profile. And so this first question on the phone number, you can just enter in really any phone number. This isn't going to block you or anything. Don't sweat about this one. This was just the number that I used to then send participants their micropayments via mobile money. Sorry, but I'm not going to be sending you money via mobile money. So you can enter in any phone number here. Sex, answer as you wish. Age, answer as you wish. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the informed consent. So you're not going to be able to press done unless you have either accepted or declined. And if you try to accept or decline, it's going to force you to actually open up that informed consent and actively consent or not. And so once you complete that, it's going to look like this last screen on the right. Okay, so the next step, as Amira had mentioned, was that we will need to create a vendor. So this refers back to those initial screens that I told you, where the mental model for this application is that I'm imagining that a participant is at the market, they log into Pocket, and then they report a series of food prices. So the next thing that I'm going to ask you to do is, so now we want to be back at the welcome back home screen. Everyone can see that. And the next option when you hit start, after you have already created a profile, is that it's going to take you to the vendor, to the creative vendor. And so here you can put in any information that you want for the vendor name. You'll then select the vendor type, take a geostamp, and hit next. The engagement code, yeah, the engagement code, let's re-put that in there. Kamal, can you put that engagement code back in there in the chat?
Yeah.
Sounds like folks are just catching up with us. Thank you.
It's okay, I got it.
Thank you. So it's food prices crowd. That's what you enter as the engagement code. Sure thing. So I'm just waiting for folks to catch up. And if you can let me know when you have been able to create a vendor. And then this will be the last kind of tricky part of it, is creating this vendor, and then we're going to just go into the food pricing. So if you can get through this part, you'll be home free and able to play with food price data. So there's your incentive. Has anyone gotten to creating a vendor? Great. Ore has created a vendor. Anyone else? Yay, 2 people have created a vendor. And hopefully it has also requested you to submit your travel time as well. Great. Okay. It looks like we have folks who have been able to create a vendor. So now we're going to start entering food prices. And the rest of the time that we have really is going to be just playing around with entering some of these food prices for various products. So we're going to start easy with prepared products, packaged products, if you will, and then we're going to move on and get increasingly difficult. So be ready for it. So, but first I want to take you through as a reminder of how to now create, to report a food price. So after you have created your vendor, it's going to take you back to your welcome back screen. Hopefully you all can see that. And at the bottom of that screen, there's a button that says submissions. So you're going to click on the submissions. And then the topmost option will be the vendor that you just created. So you can click on that vendor. And you should then see all the information that you just typed in. And at the very bottom of that screen is going to be an option to add additional information. And when you click on that, you can now enter your food item. The currency, so right, this is probably set for UGX, which is Uganda shillings. For now, just put in anything. Sorry about that. It won't be, so typically, I think, well, I don't know. I mean, I'll let Kamal and Myra speak to this, but for my study, it was only open to people in Kampala, and so we didn't have to worry about different currencies. So it's just set for UGX. But I'm sure that they would be able to put in any currency that is needed. Okay, I have at least one person here. Okay, so I'm going to flip back to this slide. So this is going to be our first examples. And so first I'm just going to task you to submit, to report one of these two food items using the options that are available to you in that page. One of the things to note on this screen when you're entering in information is that some fields have stars next to them, so those are required. So you have to put in a food item name, you have to put in a quantity, and you have to put in a unit. But then there's other fields down below, which are like brand or number, other description, etc. Those boxes are there, but they're not required. And then the very last button on this page will be to take a picture. And so you can take a picture of anything, or you can take a picture of the picture that's on this slide. Again, the really cool thing from a research perspective is that when the user snaps that picture, it also automatically captures the GPS location. Great, so I see at least one person was able to enter the price for eggs. Kamal or Humaira, can you address this question about the entering the engagement code? The next button is not active. Okay, thanks, Humaira. Anyone else able to enter in the food price data for either one of these items? Yes, okay. I have a few. So Chow, I'm wondering which one did you do, the oil or the eggs?
I did the eggs.
Tell me, so how was that for you? Any challenges or was it pretty clear?
It was really easy.
And the information was all available to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you just tell me, like, tell me what information you put in each of those fields?
Let me just pull it up again. I just typed in the food item name, the brand, so whatever was written on the package, and then the price.
Okay, and what did you put for the quantity and unit?
Well, I put one, but if I was doing this, I would probably do like half a dozen.
Okay. So you put one, and then what was the unit?
So I didn't do it. Actually, I just put item, but what I would have put would be carton.
Oh, you did item. Okay, great. No, sorry, I don't mean to be putting you on the spot. This is exactly the type of thing that it's just really interesting to see and to think through. So I'm curious, so if anyone else who did eggs, so I think Alex, you said you entered eggs. Can you tell us what you entered, especially for the quantity and the unit?
Yeah, so I did a quantity of 6 and then an individual item for the unit. It's like 6 items of eggs purchased at once.
Yeah, interesting. Great. Go ahead, Victoria. Yeah, guys, you don't need to wait to be called on. Just go ahead and ask. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess when I was filling it out, I was wondering, how do you handle training if this is crowdsourced? Because I imagine with all of the different ways people can enter the same type of item, there's a lot of cleaning to do after this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I didn't really, so when I first started this study, I didn't realize all the different way, I kind of you have your own blinders on when you're creating this thing, right? And so you're like, of course, people will enter it this way. And even with the research assistants, I realized all the ways in which they might enter the same data. And so at least with the research assistants, I was able to, we could train them. But yeah, with the crowd, you're exactly right. You can't train them. And so that's, I think, one of the tricky things about it is you do have to review it. And that's also where the picture becomes absolutely critical. I have so much appreciation now for how important it is to get the photos of the items, because if you don't understand what's in the description, at least you have the picture there to refer back to. But that's a great question. Go ahead.
If I could also just jump in, Victoria. So what we actually do is we create, for most projects, what we do is create customized video tutorials. And so what this basically allows is usually the researcher or the NGO will make a WhatsApp group of the different participants or folks that are crowdsourcing. And it'll just be almost like the way you saw Humera share her screen and just do a very quick 2-3 minute overview. We'll usually have one of the participants do that in the local language, because what we learned in these in-app tutorials is that people really don't like to read, but they really like to watch. And so what we've actually done is created a lot of these kind of 2-3 minute screen recording WhatsApp video tutorials that work really, really well. And oftentimes in these WhatsApp groups, if folks have questions, they can drop them, or we also have a support team that's pretty much on call all the time to be able to address any queries that come into. And then secondly, in terms of verification, we actually have a whole system where the researcher can accept and reject data that's coming in from the field and also provide feedback. So let's say, for example, Chow took a picture of a banana peel when she was supposed to be taking a picture of eggs. Then very quickly, let's say Andrea is the researcher, she can give Chow feedback that says, hey, this photo is incorrect. I'm not accepting the submission. And then Chow has an opportunity to see that feedback and resubmit the submission with the right photo. So we've built a lot of different mechanisms to both train and onboard users, and then also to verify data. And also, Andrea, sorry, I thought for some reason we were clocking out in 5 minutes, but I forgot we have another 30 or so.
Do you necessarily know everyone
Yeah.
is participating in the crowdsourcing though?
It depends on the nature of the project. So crowdsourcing, I kind of like to say crowdsourcing is a little bit of a spectrum. And some of the projects that we do, the participants are known to the researcher or the NGO, or they're sometimes beneficiaries of an intervention, or they're research participants. So in that case, the organization, the researcher has access to all the participants. In other scenarios, it's a little bit more public, where maybe someone walking down the street can sign up through a QR code. In which case, what we
So
do.
I'll tell you that in my case. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead,
Sorry,
Andrea.
Kamal. Sorry, my internet is in and out. Um,
I think maybe we're having some
so
connection issues.
yeah, sorry. So in my case, I didn't necessarily know who all the participants were. And I would say that it's hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better
Can you hear
now.
me now? Okay, sorry. I've just turned off my video. Yeah, so I was saying that in my study, I didn't necessarily know who the participants were because it was an open call and anyone could opt in. And I would say that it is like relying on people to necessarily go through help tutorials is like that a lot of folks just won't do it. They're going to come to you. So I put my phone number, my WhatsApp number on every message that went out so that when people have difficulties, they could just send me a note. And so I had a lot of those for kind of hand holding. I see there's some other hands up. So go ahead. I saw there was one from, sorry, I don't know your name, but AR, and yeah, go ahead. How is this different than questionnaires created on Google or other sites? So Kamal, let me let you answer that question. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of features here that wouldn't be accessible on, let's say, a Google form. First and foremost is this entire system of incentives where users are getting points and rewards for completing data is very much app specific. The second thing is all this type of rich media, like uploading videos and these types of things, and enabling push notifications and one-to-one data verification is another thing. The third thing is offline data collection. So without having an application, you're not really able to complete data collection offline and then submit it later. And then, of course, there's this whole system, which we haven't really shown too much in this presentation, but being able to share insights, resources, dashboards, maps, any type of information or insights back to the user. All of these basic forms are great for just basic data collection, but if you're looking to do something that has a little bit more nuance, in this case, crowdsourcing food prices with incentives, then you would need something a little bit more complex. I don't know, Andrea, if you've used those tools in the past versus Pocket, I don't know if you have any other uh, insights to share using an app like this.
I don't, so I haven't used them in the past. I think I mean, yeah, I guess I don't have enough experience to have there's key features with Pocket that I was so grateful for. So some of the, as I mentioned, the picture, the GPS stamp, the fact that it was readily usable on an Android phone, because in Uganda, most people are using Android phones. There are just a lot of like some of the, so I mean, even as you guys can experience here, so the usability of a tool is absolutely essential. And when you're asking volunteers to participate and to spend their time doing a task for you, you really need to make it as easy as possible for them. And so for me, Pocket like it ticked a lot of those I's and crossed a lot of those T's, where I just wanted something that was as simple as possible to get people up and going so that they could spend their time reporting data and not playing around with tools. And also I really wanted to limit the information that they were entering. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, all those things might be possible on Google Sheets, but I spent a lot of time actually comparing different tools that were available. I actually did a benchmarking study on options that were available. And at the end of the day, Pocket was just the best fit for me in terms of my timeline, in terms of the features that it enabled.
Just get to these ones too. Victoria, is this possible to use on an Android tablet? Yes, you should be able to use it on a tablet, depending on kind of the type of tablet that it is, but Android tablet should be okay. I think some other organizations and projects have used that. Sangdora, can you have anyone to reach out to in case of difficulties while using the app? Yes, definitely. I think in Andrea's, she was the spokesperson and the main person triaging these questions. But in our application, we do have links to WhatsApp groups for support and also a contact email inbox where we can triage any type of issues that people are having with the application. So definitely, yeah.
So if it's okay, and if you have another burning question, please drop it in there. I just want to get through a few more examples. In part, this is kind of gets to the fun of doing food price reporting. So I'm wondering if we can try a very different type of food item. I know some of the ones on the left is a little bit blurry, but I wonder if you guys can try putting in entering in these options, and then when you've done so, let us know what you entered. And once you've entered them, please let me know. And so, and if you have, let us know also if you have any difficulty figuring out how to get back. Basically, you want to go back to that same vendor and scroll all the way down to the bottom and then click that related tasks link again in order to enter another food item. So here we're staying within the same vendor and entering multiple food items.
When customizing the submission forms for your own project, is it possible to move different fields around? So for example, like putting brand right under food item name, because I find myself typing in the brand under the food item name, and then when I get to the bottom, I realize I have to switch.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, every single form and the order of every question and the conditional logic of every question can be totally customized. So yeah, definitely. I think these are all kind of the same surveys that Andrea and her team built a few months ago. So we're just kind of using the exact same instance, but of course, with different projects, you can totally customize the questions and the surveys and the order and the pages and all that kind of stuff.
So I'm wondering, did anyone enter in the items from this screen? Or are people getting shy? So what I wanted you to see here or to experience here is that there's a difference, right, between entering in the solid food and then the wet food. So here we're going to be entering in milliliters, but it's still a branded item, which in some ways makes it quite easy. And I know we're getting down to the last half hour, so I just want to get to a few more, and this gets to your that last question of why is brand where it is. Yes, absolutely, you can move it. So this form is the way that I asked Poket to make it. So everything is placed there where I asked them. So we have more of our packaged food items, our branded food items, very clear prices because these have been purchased in a supermarket. Now we get to some foods that are a little bit less easy. And so I'm just curious what you all would enter for these examples. And the reason why I said that this was related to the last question was because here, obviously, we don't have brands. So in Uganda and Kampala, most people are not shopping at supermarkets. Although these are actually still pictures from supermarkets. So the nice thing here is that we still at least have the prices that are visible. And we have the food item that is visible, but we don't have any brands. So I'm wondering, would anyone tell me what you would put in here, what you would enter for the quantity and unit for one of these?
So Andrea, are these prices per a unit of weight? It's a little hard for me to read.
Yeah, that is exactly what I want you to struggle. Yeah, so these are per kg, exactly. So if you can see on the very far right, so it's 5,500 for the carrots, it's 5,500 per kg, and for the tilapia, it's 15,500 per kg. And so in that case, you would just enter in for the quantity, you could enter in 1 and then kg as the unit, and that would be enough. Then you get to even more trickier food items. So the one on the left, these are green peppers, but they have been packaged. They're in a plastic wrap and they have a particular weight and price on them. So one of the tricky things that we saw happen with these ones is which price do you enter? So I know it's a little bit hard to see, but on that tag, the biggest price is 3,440. That's the price for this actual package. But there's also a price which is 8,000, and that's the 8,000 per kg. So both of those should be equivalent if you take into account the weight. But you like for an item like this, it can get really confusing really quickly. And so you can get some kind of funny data that's entered. And this is still in a supermarket, right? Another issue that we came across, so the one on the right hand side here, this food item is actually, it's called Buga. It's red amaranth. But if you look down below, there are prices, but the prices are not, so the price on the left says oak leaf. That is not what this food item is. I don't even know what the food item with this price tag is. So this is one of the, again, another challenge that we had in the study, which is that the prices that are listed in these supermarkets they do not necessarily always refer to the item that is shown. And so you have to be really careful there as well. And here we get to the really tricky things. So this is a more traditional wet market. And so the way this interaction goes, if you haven't been in a market like this before, is that you walk up to the vendor, you point at the thing that you want, and you say, how much for this, basically. And so here, as I said, the word meka means essentially how much. So you point at it, you say meka, and the vendor tells you the price. And so I'm wondering if anyone can report back what you would enter for the unit and the quantity here. Anyone, are you still with me?
Would you put per kilo?
So if you had a scale, you could put a kilo, but the most markets don't have a scale. And it looks like while folks are thinking, Kamal or Myra, there's a question for you about the picture quality.
Yeah. Does picture quality or capacity affect it being uploaded? So no, as long as you have access to the camera enabled in the application, you can take a picture. If the picture quality is really high, on the back end, we do compress it just to make it easier to upload, kind of the way WhatsApp compresses photos when you submit them or when you send them. So it can be high quality, it can be low quality, but eventually it'll still upload. If it's too high, we compress it. Another question, Deborah, can we get a video that can put anyone through on how to navigate through the Pocket app? So yeah, definitely. We have a few video tutorials. So if you're interested in accessing some of those, feel free to reach out, or we can see if we can dig them up and share them with you if you want to shoot me a message.
Yeah, this is great. You guys are, so remember if at the very beginning I said that I wanted to make you struggle, and this is the struggle that I wanted to make you do. So yeah, I think all these are good options, and this is where it really comes down to, in some ways, the choices that you make available on the app in terms of what units you make available. Also, like it's a bit easier again when you have research assistants that you can train, but then when you're doing crowdsourcing, you can get all sorts of crazy information. So this is again where those pictures become really essential. So what we did for, so in Uganda, these are called Ndizi, but bananas is that we offer a cluster option as a unit. So because we have both Ndizi as a cluster, we have Bagoya, which is another type of banana as a cluster, and we also have Matoke, which is a green plantain basically as a cluster. And so we offered cluster as the unit. So they would put in one cluster of Ndizi. Now the difficulty with that, and this is I know we're getting to the end of our time, but I just wanted to show that when you do that, what the actual weight of a cluster really varies. So here I'm showing that we had one cluster that was 331 grams, and I had another cluster that was 949 grams. And so this kind of underscores that point that I didn't catch who said it at the beginning, but the weight is really essential. Without the weight, for an item like this, you really don't know how much you have. So one of the things that I started doing in the MECA study was for all the foods that they actually purchased was that when I got them home, I actually weighed them. So you don't necessarily have to weigh every food item, because again, when you're dealing with a crowd, you're not necessarily you don't know who those people are, you don't have a relationship with them, you're not gonna be able to weigh their food. But you could take examples from the market to try to get an average weight. But it's really tricky for these types of foods. And in a market like Uganda or Kampala, the majority of people are shopping at wet markets where their food comes like this, unpackaged, unbranded. And so this is a major problem that has to be solved when doing food price data collection. So here's a similar situation, just to kind of run you through a few more of these. So with rice, for instance, the typical interaction goes, give me 1 kg of rice. And then you say, you know, how much? And they give you the price, and that's fine. And she actually, she has a scale, if you can see, in front of the bag of rice. That's a scale. And then she weighs it. You don't really see, you just kind of have to trust that it's 1 kg. And then she, you know, puts it in the plastic baggie, ties it up, and you're good to go, and you pay your 6.5 because she tells you that 1 kg costs 6.5. So fine. But then we have a similar problem where we get that on our scale, and you can see that there's pretty big variation in the actual weight of these items. So quote unquote 1 kg of rice might be 935 grams, or it might be 1,034 grams. And so you don't really know what it is if you're not actually weighing it. So just a few other examples of how this works and where some of these tricky things go. So these are Irish potatoes. The way that this works in the market is that you point to the quote unquote heap that you want. You ask how much, and they say 4,000. One of the things that we did with this one was to enter in the number of so instead of putting in 1 heap, you could count the Irish potatoes and say 10 items. But still, ideally, you can weigh those at the or get some example weights at the end of the day to try to get a sense for, you know, for a heap this size or that size. But these non-standard quantities are really difficult to work with. Yes, okay, so I think you guys get the idea. Let's go ahead and skip through to what this data looks like from an administrative perspective. So this is another benefit of Poket, which is I could review the data that was coming in real time. And so let me go ahead and switch to to the internet. So let me move this stuff out of the way, because what I want to be able to show you is what this looks like. Right, so great. So this is what the Poket dashboard looks like from an administrative perspective. You can see that these were all entered on June 20th, which is today. I can see the different vendors that participants have entered, and then also the shopping trip. So this will be the actual food items. So we have some examples of those. I'm just going to open one up. So typically, I don't know why it doesn't have a picture, but okay, there it is. Great. So this is a fish. Fantastic. Someone reported the price for a fish. And so here I can see what the food item is, and I can see the GPS location. I can see the date. I can see who submitted it, and also all the supporting information. There's also
Andrea, I think you may have muted yourself.
Oh, thanks. So Kamal can explain this a little bit more, but there's also, if you want to use this to accept or reject these submissions or provide feedback to the person who submitted it, this is the way that you could do it. A few other things that I found super useful is that you can actually download the data. So if you don't want to work with it all in the dashboard, You can download the images and you can download all of the data separately. So those were the key features that I used, but let me turn it over to Kamal and friends. And I'm sure there are other features on here that I was not able to, or that I did not make use of. Over.
Sure, sure. So yeah, really quickly, there's a few different features. So you can view the data in this grid view that Andrea was sharing. And if you press this map view toggle, you can also see kind of a more location-based view. It may not work really well in this case because the locations for all of these are so disparate. But if you go back to, yeah, it's like this is probably one of the participants. But overall, you can view them in different ways and apply different filters too. So in some clients, they have different types of tasks or forms or filters that they want us to build out if they want to be able to, sort by different cohorts or countries or anything like that. Victoria, yes, it downloads as a CSV file, so Excel. We can show you what that looks like just with the click of a button. Andrea, if you just press download and download data, it'll export as a CSV file and save to your downloads folder. And then you can open up and access the raw data whenever you'd like. So it's saved somewhere, Andrea, on your computer. I'm not sure if we need to open it or go into that level of granularity, but basically there's a column structure and all the rows are basically the different submissions that have been made. And some of the other features which are not really enabled for this project are around data visualization and analytics. So if you want to visualize the data, see graphs, be able to, have specific KPIs that are always available in real time to show you how, let's say, the number of submissions per day or something like that, we can configure that as well. And then, of course, there's the whole dashboard. Maybe, Andrea, if you do want to go to the contributors tab on the top. Yeah, even push notifications. This allows you to send real-time push notifications to users. But on the top, if you go to contributors, Andrea, the contributor details and also redemption details. So if you click one of these, you'll basically be able to see information about the different users. And if you are using incentives for your project, then this will allow you to basically see who is eligible for receiving how much money or which incentives. So basically, you'll be able to see what users have submitted data, how much they've submitted, how much you owe, how many have been accepted versus rejected, how many still need to be reviewed. So it gives you a sense of kind of which users are really active, which are maybe not as active, who still needs their data reviewed, and then eventually who is supposed to receive, how much money or reward or incentive or whatever it is.
And sorry, I just wanted to open up this file so you can see. So this is the file that I just downloaded from the dashboard. This is the way that the Excel comes down. So, but this will be a lot more than just what we did here today. This is going to be all of my study data. Anything? Do you want me to go to that redemption details?
Yeah, so as I was saying, you can kind of see the different details in terms of who's owed what, in terms of the different users. The other thing I should mention on the top right, you'll see Form Builder, which I don't think is accessible here. We kind of did everything. But overall, you should be able to also configure the different surveys now. So you can basically build out your own forms, your own surveys, your own questionnaires as well. I think that's pretty much it in terms of the dashboard, unless Andrea, you want to share anything else?
No, I think that's it, unless there's any other questions. I see that there's 2 more chats in there. Okay, great. So I think we are going to
I'll
jump out.
put
We
it
got
again. But if anyone is doing field data collection or is interested in learning more about how our tools work, feel free to get in touch. And I think, Andrea's done such a great job with, working with the tool and making it her own for her project. And I think there's just so many different insights that she's gleaned, and I'm really excited. I know, Andrea, you have a million things on your backlog right now, but I'm just so excited to see the published study once you're actually able to slice and dice everything.
Yeah, I'm really excited too to see that study. Yeah, so just I guess as we're waiting for questions to come in, yeah, no, thanks so much to you guys, Kamal, to you and to your team for all the support. Thanks to Imana for the financial funding, and for everyone for joining us on this call. I do hope that it has been useful to you and your future work. And again, we're really happy to answer any questions or just even share experiences. So I'm curious, so several people mentioned that you have experience with food price data collection in the past. And I'm especially curious if anyone has used crowdsourcing for food price data collection. So if you have any of those experiences, I'd love to hear about them too in these last few minutes. Over.
Victoria, you see your hand up?
Hi again. I
No,
don't
these are great.
I don't have an experience to share, but I'm wondering if you've used this data to do cost of a healthy diet calculations, and if you have, how was it entering the Excel output into the cost of a healthy diet Excel workbook, and if that was like an easy transfer or not?
So that would be a next step. So right now I'm still cleaning the data. There's quite a bit. After 6 months of data collection, there's a lot of data to clean. And there's lots of interesting learnings about how the data needs to be structured in order to analyze it. So I haven't taken it to that step. Really what I wanted to be able to do in this study is to be able to demonstrate that you can use these other methods as an alternative to in-person market surveys, because in-person market surveys require, I mean, for all the reasons that Kamal mentioned at the very beginning, there's a lot of cost and effort that goes into those in-person surveys. So the first step for me is really to do that essentially validation, or at least comparison between the prices that you get with crowdsourcing and then with some of the other methods that I used compared to in person. But then, to look at the variability in prices for across these different market types, across like geographically, and then ultimately to be able to say that you can use this type of data to do the cost of the diet analysis. And to use it in that way. So I know that didn't answer your question, but I haven't gotten there yet. But I think like this, the idea is that a tool like this would be able to be used for exactly that, for collecting food price data that you could then use in that the cost of the diet analysis. Any other questions or thoughts?
I'm curious if the app will be translated into different languages, or is it just English as the default?
Yeah, so definitely it can be translated to different languages. I think we're probably at 25 or 26 languages currently. So basically, depending on the research study or the client, we are able to do language translations, and it kind of consists of two things. The first is the actual survey questions, which are going to be in the local language, which is mostly on the researcher or the NGO. And from our side, what we do is, as you've kind of used the app today, every single button, every single drop down, every single word that's on our user interface, we can also translate, usually within just 2 or 3 days, depending on who has access to the translations and how quickly we can get things translated. So definitely it is available in other languages. And if we don't have that language, we can implement it within a few days.
Have you done any work with populations where there's poor literacy and using the app?
Yeah, definitely. So in low literacy settings, we kind of think of literacy in two forms, one being digital literacy and another being traditional forms of literacy. And so in the low literacy settings, what we usually tend to do, and this is where the videos are really important, is we first try and make sure that people can follow along in a WhatsApp video. Basically, what we say is if you can use WhatsApp and a smartphone, then you can probably use Pocket. And we just have folks follow along in that video tutorial. Another thing that's really nice for folks that are on Android is that built into the Google keyboard, there's actually a transcription function. I think folks might even be able to see it right now. If they open their Gboard, there's a mic button, and when they press that, everything that they say in their microphone actually gets typed. And so what we've seen is that that's a really important setting that Google has enabled, which allows anyone to complete surveys and forms using just voice for the most part. And so that's kind of created a little bit of a bridge for low literacy settings. But overall, the prerequisites are that the user has a smartphone or has access to a smartphone at least and can navigate, a smartphone application. and complete surveys, even if the responses might be more voice-based.
I think one additional thing, if I can add there, with in the context here, it's really a multilingual context because you have English, but you also have Luganda, and you have a mix of all and other languages as well. And so that comes into play a bit in the food items. So, I could have restricted the food items that I wanted people to report, but I didn't want to restrict them. And so I left it open. And so obviously that's a open field and people could write whatever. And so sometimes you do have to kind of either is that people write things in Luganda, and you have to realize that that's in a different language and what that item is that they're talking about. And again, that's just where that picture becomes super, super helpful in addition to the information that's provided over.
Wonderful. So we're reaching
Any
the end
other
of the session
questions or
today.
comments?
Yeah, so we might have time for one more question before we close the session.
I had a question on how much it costs. I've just found it on your website. Well, I found information about that on your website.
Yeah. So basically, in terms of cost, we look at a few different factors. There's kind of two drivers. The first being the upfront effort that it takes to configure the tools. So for example, language translations or specific incentives or customizations that you need in the application. So that we kind of scope out based off of the amount of time that it takes our engineering team to configure the tools. And so if you're interested in kind of getting a quote or anything like that, we send over a set of questions. And then the other part of it is basically a monthly or an annual subscription, depending on the duration of the project. And that usually starts at a few $100s upwards, but depending on the country sometimes and the nature of the project, sometimes we see if we can be a little bit flexible, especially if it's just kind of a pilot that researchers trying to get off the ground. So do reach out if you're interested and you have a use case, and we'll try our best to find a way to work with you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time. And thanks again to the Academy for giving us this platform, and Andrea for doing such an awesome job sharing about both your work and ours too.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Camille, and thank you so much, Alex and team. And thanks everyone for being here. Take care.
Great. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody. Take care.